Well, I just bought
It's still spinning.
Matt, I gotta go.
Go ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome everyone to the February 9th, 2024 meeting of the New Jersey Antique Radio Club here in Bowen Hall, Princeton University. Are there any new members, potential members, or new faces in the crowd? No, I see a lot of old faces. All right, let's go to infirmary reports. All right, I have member Lou Lombardi had an operation on his right eye. So it was really iffy if he was going to gain it back. So really happy to say that he had a very successful 78 years old, and he's had this problem for a couple of years now. It's been diminishing. So he's real happy about that. Now also we have our very own Dave Sika, who obviously is not here this evening, and he has been suffering some neuralgia, if you want to call it that, to do with his feet. And now he has to have one on his other foot. And it's very painful, and he has a hard time moving around. So that is why he's not here this evening. Fortunately, Mr. Mevo is here, but unfortunately, Mr. Mevo doesn't want to cooperate this evening.
It's on.
So Matt is trying as best he can, but I see a red light on, the camera.
It is on. It's working.
Why isn't it still red?
Red means it's on.
Red's recording.
Okay, good. All right, great. All right. So our DX members, welcome, welcome, welcome. For all of you folks way and far away. But we have one DX member from Virginia, and he's sitting right next to us, so he won't be DXing the meeting this evening. Okay, so I'm glad to have everybody on board. Okay, all right, on to old business. Dues are due. Dues are due, all right? I can't imagine anybody in this room who has not paid their dues. And I won't ask for to show their hands, but I just hope that it's not true. But they are due, and there will be, well anyway. If you are a member who isn't tardy with their renews, or you know any members who are tardy and not paying their dues, please give them a nudge and let them know that club dues are the lifeblood of our club and any club. So please, we need dues. And you know, not to be a hard on, but the cutoff date for renewals is February 29th. 29th? What do you mean, Rich? 29th? Well, it's leap year, so you get an extra day to pay your due. Our broadcast band DX contest has been over. So Tom Provost, how many members participated and how many logs did you receive?
20 DXers. It must be, yeah.
Is that the best?
I have to go back and check the records.
Because it sounds like, I mean,
in the past, I think 22 was the most DXers I remember.
But you know, there was a lot of activity and there was a lot of talk on the communicator, and I think that really helps.
Yeah.
And, you know, Al was asking and answering a lot of questions, and yeah, I got excited. And a lot of people got into it, and a lot of new people too, which is great. Really good. Were there any categories not entered?
No.
Look at that.
All categories.
How about that? Yeah.
Wow.
Good. Good. All right. Because I know there's the times when there was one category and there was only one contestant. And, gee, they got a prize.
Yeah, Rich, roughly how many members do we have?
How many members?
Assuming good renewals.
You're saying how many have renewed?
No, how many members do we have finishing last year, for example?
Oh, we have 129. No, what am I saying? 229.
129.
129's out in the
Yeah. And so far, we have about 50 who have not renewed. So I've got to get on the bandwagon and start insulting people. I shouldn't say that on camera. That's exactly what happened. But a lot of people just forget. Just forget. I think the reason they forget because it's so insignificant. The amount of $25 a year is so insignificant they don't even think about it.
Has our membership gone up or down?
It's gone down. It has gone down. Yes. We had a peak last year of 2022, and we were at 249. Right? But I've said it before. We have, I call them cruisers, come in for a year and then leave. They see what it's about or what it's not about, and then they leave. It's to be expected. So not a problem. We've got somebody from Staten Island that showed up. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's move on. All right. Dr. Forte, he's very good at reading the Wall Street Journal, and he sent me a clipping, Amcar Radio, Fate, Lies with Congress. And just a synopsis of this, it's been going on for quite a while now. And from the clipping, the battle to keep AM radio in our cars, a big backer of the bill in the House is the New Jersey House member, your member, Josh Gottheimer. He's a Democrat and from New Jersey, and he's been very active in pushing for AM radio to stay in cars. And how do I know that? I saw it on NJTV. I get NJTV, so I've seen him around, and he's very sincere about it. Now we can go into all the details. We all know about the Teslas and the e-automobiles that they say, oh, it makes too much noise and all this interference, and we all know that can be fixed. Okay, but the real news is that you get to subscribe to, and that they make money that way. So anyway, so we're always pushing with the AM radio the safety aspect of it all. So we'll certainly go that route also.
Well, it gets through when nothing else does.
Say it again?
It gets through when nothing else does.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It goes further.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so on to more new business. But first, a commercial. All right, for Johnny Auction Services, February 24th, at the Jackson Mills Firehouse. Large auction. I just received my own personal invitation and a list of radios available. And
Oh, you haven't seen anything yet.
well, Darren, I think you should come up here and let us know about that. Come on up here.
Oh.
So, yeah,
To the mic.
How large is it?
what's that?
How large is it?
It's this big. Cathedral radios. We're going to have a lot of cathedral radios. We're going to have a lot of tombstone radios and plastic radios. Or Kent cathedrals and tombstones, and half of them are restored. And like they're not all broken up or full of mice. Or, this is really going to be a really nice. Actually, this auction is going to be really nice, and the next auctions we're going to be doing some really nice radio auctions now for quite a bit of time. There's nice table sets. We're going to have at some point a 38-690 in respectable condition. We're going to have pilot TVs. We're going to have tubes, and we're going to have hi-fi equipment, and we're going to have everything. We 590S with the big Kenwood linear in its original box, like the day. I'm not sure if it was ever used. This is going to be. You're going to have some really nice stuff coming on. So the next auction is Saturday, February 24th. It's going to be in Jackson, and then we're going to have one in March out in Kutztown, and then we're going to be back in Jackson in April. So there's going to be some really good stuff coming up. So I hope to see people there.
All right, thank you. And yes, I get 10%, all right? Just to let you guys know. All right. Okay. All right, Treasurer Harry Clancer, who sits there normally, he's not there, okay? So he hasn't been there, and he wasn't last month neither, for we can't give you a financial report, but he promised that at our March meeting, he will give a financial report as ending 2023 place this weekend. So hopefully, Harry, you're out there. We'd like to see you know that you're out there. At our March meeting, by the way, it'll start our first guest speaker, and we will be having Melissa Ziabro from Monmouth University. She'll be giving a talk on the relationship between Fort Monmouth and Camp Evans, which I know a little bit about it, but I'm sure she'll know a hell of a lot more in depth about it. So I look forward to seeing her, and I hope you guys do too. She has a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, and she wears a lot of hats. And she's a very nice lady, and I think some of you folks have met her before. Al, have you met her?
I'm not sure if I met Melissa or not. I know of her.
Yeah, I know. Ray, you've met her. You know her, right?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, nice lady, right?
Yep, wonderful one.
Great, great. So again, we look forward to having you, and that will be at InfoH. All right. Okay, we're having our winter repair clinic, and that is next Saturday. All right. Has to do with how many experts I have available to help the unexperts. So can I show of hands? Okay. All right. Anybody know about Neville? No? All right, I'll give him a buzz.
I wouldn't see why not.
Right. Neville, if you're out there, okay, raise your hands, please. All right, so again, that's our winter repair clinic. Oh, no, that's right. The lady from the bank, I threw it out to her. She may be coming. I don't think she'll be bringing her train anymore, though. She has, that was fixed very well by Bill Zakowski, so she was very happy about that. All right, just in 5 weeks, all right, is our Spring Fling Hamfest show, all right, at the Parsippany PAL, and I've already been accepting some reservations, so please don't be left out. Please, if you're going to vend with us, and please vend with us, get them into me as soon as possible. I prefer an email so I can put you on the list. I'd rather not take lists out here since it is 5 weeks away too. I don't want to happen what happened last time, which was fortuitous for the club. We oversold 50 tables, and for the first time in my life, I actually turned vendors away. We couldn't fit them in there. And there is a number on the wall of how many people can be in that hall that size. Because then we get an inspection by the fire department too.
Well, you know, the problem is that they won't try to leave it once they trip over the car that was parked in the middle of the egress there.
Yes, Darren, yes. Well, that won't happen again, okay? All right, okay. All right, so. Docent duty, all right, docent duty, Ray. I see Harry is,
It's going okay. People come in at the last minute and volunteer, but we have been very successful through the spring. In March and April, we have a lot of schools signed up, so we're getting what we always wanted: lots of kids. So this is the place to do it. Yeah, we've got a couple of people, good docents. Yeah.
once a month, once a week, please, is that you put in some time there. It's really, really helpful. I see John Stoll from Virginia. He's thinking about it, but okay, all right. Hopefully you do read the broadcast. So Dave, in his infirmed content, folks. I want to thank Fred for putting out something on the broadcaster, and of course Marsha. She's always got something. And you know, you just don't want to hear about me and just one other person. So please, hey, let Dave know. Okay, send pictures. They're so easy to do. It's really easy to do. As a matter of fact, Matt happened to put in a very nice article too. This month had to do with a visit I made to Twin Lights, and you know, guys, you gotta go to Twin Lights, all right? It's in Highlands. It's New Jersey's second highest point. What's the highest point? Yeah, and that's where is that? Way out west, I imagine.
Northwest.
Northwest, yeah.
What, Judas?
Yeah, it's in Jersey. Yeah. You know, to me, the amount of history that's in that area. I've done surf casting in Seabright, which, you know, people are always going down to LBI and all that. Hey, I don't have to go down that far. I can just go to Seabright. And I can see the dolphins, I can see whales. The flatland is from down south. Come on north. Come on north. And experience it. Other new business, anybody want to talk about? Limark, Sunday, February 25th. The Long Island Mobile Amateur Radio, Jersey Antique Radio Club members from Long Island, which are about 6. And I found there is a indoor annual auction just north of Providence, New Jersey, with a flea. I don't know why, it's the first thing I'm hearing now. And yet, they go back at least a decade.
I went several years ago. It was more ham oriented at that.
Yeah, it's a ham fest. I'm sorry. I didn't say
We
that.
tried to.
It's at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, we're usually.
You're gone. You're done by 12. So I thought that was a great idea, and I go north to go to it. So I'm going to try and make it. I'm going to try and check it out. 5 megahertz. So anyway, all right. This is sick. I saw a picture of a deceased member of our club there. So. Corner? Anything? No? All right. Tom, when do you think you will?
To put it on the computer in a couple weeks time.
All right. Any surprises? Anything nefarious?
I'm pretty easy peasy anymore.
I know you used to.
So, well, how come you heard, you know, Denver, but you didn't hear Chicago? Start to hallucinate a bit.
As long as they hear something on 850, it's KLA.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so look, let's have a very brief intermission, okay? And we need the sale of our 50/50. Have Professor Mike in his presentation, okay? So brief. Let's keep it on.
He's here?
Yeah, I was gonna. I'm sorry, I still have the. I gotta get you my password from the upstairs. Hey, Matt.
I'm okay.
You're okay? He's okay?
Yeah, it's working. This wasn't straight. Always at the last second.
$10? So they're, what's that? You want 20? What that? That's all right.
Yeah, it was like 60-some%.
Well after
You get the I have 1,000 watt. 1,000 watt. Now that wasn't a total bulk. I have 1,000 watt.
It should be 30, but it's
But that was a lot of money.
No, don't do that thing. You do that in one day. Just go easy like that.
Let's consult it.
Should have 30.
One of the standard ones is actually Edison.
I think I'm all right.
Three for $2? Well, our 60s are half the fun to take a feed around.
Sorry. If people buying 30, you should have 30.
Well, people are buying 30.
I do have 30. I do have 30.
See, there's comedian, there's probably LED.
That's another story.
No, and, where are they going for that?
Dollar each, 3 for 2.
I've been trying to get rid of this, my friend down here.
Give me $4.
What's that? Okay. What you probably have, so you get 6.
It's probably.
You're not getting 6 broken ones again, right?
Well, 6 losing things. That's the way I
You
get
would give me one to tell them.
He did.
Yeah, there's some county official game coach.
Yeah.
Get on my case to buy tickets. And I said, "Oh, probably can't buy tickets." She said, "Yeah, you can." And I told Ann, if you never ever give me one that wins, I won that night, and I had to give it back.
Yeah.
How many named after the great mobile? How was that?
Give me 2.
Give me 6.
You get $1.
They were used also in industry.
Turntable needs to be taken apart and moved, but that's a big.
It's like a Zenith 7 or 8 or something, one of these big radios.
Which they only, when they made them, it was only high power.
I know you're coming. I gotta run downstairs. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
So I know what you're talking about.
$1 each, 3 for
And a
2.
lot of these radios, when they were built, was 50.
Yeah, and they were low.
Yeah, $1 each, 3 for 2.
But he, you know, he wants to sell that.
Oh, I need a big ass light bulb.
Yeah, I have 1,000 watts.
No.
Philadelphia Choir.
Batman.
Yeah, with the flag and everything.
For the bat signal.
Hey, no, you need $1. I'll give you $1 when I get $1. All right? Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, I got $1 for you. Could you hand him $1? Oh. Thank you.
I wish I had all his toys. Martial arts and lasers and cool toys.
If you want a human Packard generator like that, I can supply it. $5. How you doing?
See
How
what-
are you, Josh?
One guy bought 30 gigs. Really? Yeah.
These tickets don't split that easily.
Here, give me the ones you've already sold, I'll rip them up.
Okay. And the problem is the one that's,
So Matt, what was the problem with the connecting with it?
I don't know.
50-50, I gotta go out there. And
Yeah, that's
walk
fine.
the-
They just sometimes they don't finish connecting for whatever reason. I got it the last waking second. But it just say error, and then modern crap doesn't tell you what.
Are
the
you broadcasting or
Yeah,
is it?
it's going out to YouTube and recording to your. What's in the little test tubes that do I have to wait
Which,
on top of the oscillator?
those are, the little vials,
Yeah.
that's fluorescent dye.
Okay.
So it's, I'm going to talk a little bit about dye lasers.
Okay.
And you put in ultraviolet light and you get out visible light. So I have a black light there. And then if you put a filter on it for breaking the light into its colors with a diffraction grating, it becomes a tunable laser. So it's really very, basically the theme is regenerative oscillation. So I'm going to talk about acoustic regenerative oscillation. I'll talk about regen set. Do you know about regen?
Yeah.
So you know how one's the same thing, it's just a higher frequency. That's the whole talk.
Good.
And then there's other demos to go along with it.
great.
That's the. So it's there's another theme on it too, and it's Hewlett Packard is the subtext on it. So you'll see where that comes from in a minute. Now I'm going to try to keep it simple. Even though there's a lot of junk there, the ideas are basically
Sure.
And I actually want to, there's a lot of wisdom in this room. I want to tap into, because there's some things that I'm not sure why they behave exactly the way they do. I think that I know. I have a feeling Al.
You have to what?
I have a feeling that you're going to know some stuff that I'm going to pose some questions
To
the group.
Well, I'll keep my mouth shut. I'll keep my mouth
No, it's
shut.
going to be one of these ones where I don't know the answer.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll keep my mouth shut until everybody else cracks.
I got a tier list.
Let me take those from you.
You did see the video on my calendar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
We'll give you the rest of these, I'll carry some on them.
But I like what you did is that your horse and the magnet doesn't touch the pole.
Yeah.
So I had one of those, and it goes and hits.
Yeah, I had trouble with it sticking to the poles and whatnot, because the piece of iron I had for the magnet was not as soft as it could have been.
That bell, by the way, you know the picture of the bell that I sent you. That if you look at the statue that they have in Albany.
I was impressed with the statue.
It's the same bell.
Yeah.
By the way, I picked that picture off of Wikipedia. I have other pictures of it. I visited that statue.
Right.
It's now the Board of Education building in Albany. But that used to be the Albany Academy.
Right.
And upstairs was where Joseph Henry taught.
Yeah. I was impressed with the stuff you accumulated.
Oh, yeah.
Did you own those things?
They're going to the university.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've got a dozen. I'm working on one semester. So the connection, by the way, with Joseph Henry and Princeton is Ashbel Green was Princeton's president, and Ashbel Green's son was in Albany.
Okay.
And that's Jacob Green. Jacob Green, one of Joseph Henry's teachers, in Albany.
Yeah.
And then when Princeton was looking for a professor, I don't know this for certain. I know who wrote. So it was McLean wrote to Joseph Henry, supposedly asked around who was a good person to get. He wrote to Benjamin Solomon.
You know you're on camera counting money.
And we know that.
Well, that's good. That means that no funny stuff.
Princeton. And then eventually, and then Jacob Green came and was in medical center, Jefferson Medical College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Franklin Institute was, let's see. So that was.
I don't know anything about the history.
Yeah, no, I do, because I was a volunteer there.
Oh, okay.
But the Franklin Institute was Beige, Ben Franklin's grandson.
Oh, okay.
That's Alexander Beige. I mean, there were some really interesting people in Philadelphia at that time.
At what point did Henry get to the Smithsonian?
1846.
Okay.
And it was through Beige, and it was through the connection with Philadelphia. And he was for a year. He was going back and forth between Princeton and Washington. But we know that he kept on teaching till 1840. So that's and then he moved his family there.
Okay.
And then he was at the Smithsonian for the rest of his
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
And it was interesting that the Smithsonian stayed neutral in the Civil War because Jefferson Davis was one of the Smithsonian regents. And so while Joseph Henry advised Lincoln on the telegraph and things like that, he wanted the Smithsonian to be neutral.
That's interesting.
Very interesting story. And then all that, and so Mary was his daughter, didn't marry, had no source of funds, and there were two different groups. There was a group that was sort of supporters of Joseph, and you've probably heard of. So Pope is he was the editor of the Electrical Engineer, and also a friend of Edison's later.
15 people watching.
And Pope
15.
Supported Joseph Henry, and eventually Congress was petitioned to give a payment to Mary Henry because of Joseph Henry's work on the telegraph. It's a very interesting story. And Henry and Morse, Morse, publicly attacked Henry because of the Morse patent. Henry was expert witness, testified against, and Morse got really upset. And Morse was a real jerk. I don't know if you know about it.
I didn't know much about it.
Yeah, and Morse was
I've come to the conclusion that Alfred failed.
Yes, you do.
But
Morse was, he was a member of the Know Nothing Party, ran for the mayor of New York. He was a really very objectionable person, but very influential. Smart, but he also didn't like to share credit.
Well, looking forward to seeing what you do here.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, you'll think of something.
Folks, this evening we have a grand total of $27. Since we're in your house, we'd like you to pick the.
Oh, I'm happy because I'm not in that pool.
Oh, you're not in.
I'm not in the
You're
pool.
not.
I didn't buy this time.
Hey, you're late. Start at 8.
That's a
Really random here.
Yeah, right.
Okay. People listening?
Must be active. There's a plug. Does that mean it heats up?
500 975.
What's that, what?
975.
975.
Worth $15.
But you came in late.
I randomized it.
Sure is. I tell you. You are lucky.
Yeah, it's my do you think that tube is actually the oscillator?
Minus the late fee.
Hey, wait a minute. No.
Nice try there.
You're going to get this right. I got it wrong the last time, Mike. All right, so Professor Mike will be giving us a presentation entitled The Regenerative Oscillator from Audio to RF to the Visible. All right, so please pay attention. He'll be giving a test afterwards.
Right. Wrong. All right, let's see if I can get my computer up and running now. There we go. So, as you can see, I've brought a lot of items with me. It's going to be mostly demonstration and some discussion. And let me start by, Rich asked me to give a talk this month, and so I was in Hawaii for the month of December and January, and I was talking to my nephew, and I said I was trying to figure out what to talk about, and I said, well, who are you talking to? I said, the radio club, and he said, well, why don't you talk about radio? I said, good idea. I actually was originally going to talk about toy trains, which is another hobby of mine. So in thinking about, and I've talked to the club before about the history of radio and the history of scientific instruments, which is a real interest of mine. And I realized that I actually had never really talked to, I don't think, anybody in this room about what my background is. And it's not in radio. My background is as a physicist, and it's in the area of optics. But there's not a lot of distance between radio and optics. And in thinking about what I would talk about, I generally don't like to do self-promotion, but I am going to tell you about some of the work that got me promoted, that got me hired at Princeton, got me promoted at Princeton, and it's the work that I'm best known for. And it has to do with the development of tunable lasers. Let me say that again, tunable lasers. So what's a tunable laser? So a laser is a light source where you can change the color. So everybody in this room, I think, knows about test equipment. So think of a function generator, signal generator, right? Turn a knob, change the frequency. Well, that's changing an electrical signal. And you can do the same thing by turning a knob, literally turning a knob, and change the color of a laser. So that was, I decided I ought to talk about the tunable laser. I just thought this group would be interested in it. And then the principles of the tunable laser are ones that I think many of the people in this room know about. It's all based on regeneration, regenerative oscillator. I think a lot of the people in the room may know about Edwin Armstrong's 1914 patent, which is using the feedback oscillator. So I wanted to connect up my tunable laser work with Armstrong's regen set. So I'm going to pull up Armstrong's patent. We'll look at the patent. And the audio part of it, I may even start with that. I think everybody's been in a place with a microphone and a PA system, and somebody turned the gain up too high. And what happens is it chases everybody out of the room, right? Because of feedback. Well, that's feedback oscillation. And I have a little demonstration that I'll probably start with, which is a regenerative oscillator, microphone, loudspeaker, and a filter. So I'm going to put a filter. So if we think about this object, and I will start with this. Think about this object. The PA system is a broadband amplifier. So it will amplify anywhere from maybe, let's say, 100 hertz to maybe a couple of thousand hertz. I mean, they're usually, the fidelity is not wonderful. Al, is that a good range?
That's a good range.
Okay, yeah, and as you can see here, I have one of these guitar amplifiers. And I have a directional microphone. And actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to first demonstrate an acoustic feedback regenerative oscillator. So so let's see. I think if I go Alt Tab, there's a camera. And I'm going to try to do this in a way that people are not going to be screaming out of the room here. So, see what fell down later. Oh, this is a Marshall amp, and I'm doing this with a directional microphone. You know about that? It's a musical instrument. And I'm going to turn this on. Let's hope that this doesn't. Hear that? Here's another one.
So the pipes are open at both ends, so it's half wave?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay. That wasn't too bad. So that's, and there's things that I don't know about this, maybe people in this room do. So one of the issues is, so it starts from noise. Okay, so the amplifier system is a broadband amplifier. It starts from noise. The noise is at all frequencies, and then the pipe makes the microphone more sensitive to particular frequency range. It's a tunable, it's a filter. And then if I choose different filters, it then feeds back and builds up that signal. The part that I'm uncertain about is why it's not a runaway. So a lot of systems with that if it was true linear gain, I'd expect it to limit cycle. I'd expect to get oscillation, but it would be heavily distorted. But if you saw there, I brought the microphone nearer, I could get to a point where I could sustain a particular amplitude, and I don't think the wave was heavily distorted. And I think the reason, I actually like advice from here, I think the reason is probably that the amplifier saturates, that the gain saturates at high amplitude. I know it does saturate in laser systems, which work the same way. They start from noise. We'll get to that in a little bit. They start from noise, and then you feed back. If you filter out, if you have a broadband light source that has gain, so lights, well, I'll get to that in a little bit, and then you put a filter in there, you change the filter, you can change the color at which the laser's running. Does that make sense? Okay, so all right, so that's the first demonstration. That's the acoustic. We're done with the audio. That was the audio part of regeneration. All right, let's get. So, and I said, as I said, I'm going to also bring up, this is something that I sent to Rich. Oh yeah, so the second part of the topic is I'm going to focus in on Hewlett-Packard. Now, if you look closely here, I should bring out my camera again.
Is that the oscillator?
That's a 200B.
The first one?
That's the, well, the 200A was the first one. Okay. So this is the 200B. So let's just take a look at this. And this was from, I got it from a flea market. Wow, that's this guy here. I think I paid about $10 for it. I had never tested. I tested it today. It works. It's great. You see that I put a connector on. I hooked it up to a scope. It works great. You put it at the higher frequencies, you actually can hear it vibrates at that frequency, so you can hear the acoustics on it. But it works. And it has a nonlinear element. And by the way, I have this circuit diagram on it. It's a regenerative oscillator. So it has feedback. It has both feed forward and feedback, both. So it's got positive and negative feedback. So the positive, it's got a tuned circuit, which is an inductor and a capacitor. Change the tuned circuit. And then to keep the distortion down, it has an internal nonlinear element. Apparently that was the big advance of Hewlett and Packard when they first came out with this device.
Yeah, and it's a light bulb.
It's a light bulb, yes. Actually, you can open this up later. It's a little light bulb. And the light bulbs are nonlinear elements because when a light bulb lights up, it heats up the filament. And property of metals is that when metals, the resistance increases when the temperature rises. And that's the reason for that is that the atoms are jiggling more. So when the scattering of electrons going through the metal, they scatter more often because the atoms are jiggling around. So this is Hewlett-Packard regenerative oscillator. That's one part of Hewlett-Packard as part of this. I also brought in, some of you may know that Hewlett-Packard Test and Measurement was sold to Agilent. And this is an Agilent signal generator, which I'll be demonstrating in a little bit. So that's also Hewlett-Packard. I actually don't know what the circuitry is in the function generator there. So that oscillator. And then normally I use Tektronix scopes, but because I wanted to focus in on Hewlett-Packard, I brought in my Hewlett-Packard scope. And we'll do a little demonstration about radio in a minute. But the theme here is, and today, Hewlett-Packard Test and Measurement is Keysight.
Oh, didn't know that. Keysight.
Keysight, yeah. So they took over in 2015. And so I want to bring, and this is the self-promotion part. I'm going to do it right now. So I came across this a few years ago. It's a data sheet from Keysight. So they Agilent in 2015, and they were developing some of their tools, improving their test and measurements tools for doing fiber optics. So this is a NASA technical brief that Keysight got permission to reprint. So this was off of their site, Keysight. And it says, using a wideband tunable laser for optical filter measurements. And what this is, so the filter is a dense wavelength division multiplexing filter that they want to study. This is one of the later things that people now do in fiber optics. Fiber optics, for those of you, if you know anything about fiber optics, the wavelength at which you have minimum loss is about 1.3 microns. So it's in the infrared. And so the tunable laser that they want here, wideband tunable laser for optical filter measurements. And as I said, these are filters that are used in fiber optics. So this is the instrument that they were working on. And then if you look at the bottom here, it says, with a little asterisk, it says star, Karen Liu and Michael Littman optics letters. So I got a little asterisk at the bottom of this note. But it goes on further. And I said this is, so there's a design here. Let's just take a look at this. I'm going to read the text on the side here. Actually, I have a little laser pointer. How appropriate that would be. Since you're talking about laser. I usually don't like these things because I got the tremor, so you see it shakes a lot. I'm going to explain this laser later, but these are diode lasers. As a matter of fact, this little thing that I've got is a diode laser. The original work that I did, this is a design that I developed for dye lasers, organic dyes, and it was extended by Ken Harvey to use with diode lasers. And what you have here is this is the gain medium, so that's the amplifier. And then there's a mirror at the back there. In this case, they had a lens. The one that I had originally had no lens at all. And then a grating here, that's a diffraction grating. So that is a device that uses optical diffraction to break light up into. So the light comes in on the grating, and depending on the wavelength, it comes off at different angles. And then you complete the cavity, so it's from one mirror to another mirror, and so the light bounces back and forth there. And if you change the angle of that mirror, one of the features of this laser is when the light comes in, it also bounces off the grating. And so as you're changing the color of the laser, the beam is not wandering because it's just the bounce reflection off the grating. And then so this is Keysight that's doing this. And this is now a product they make, and I'm going to read this here. It says, like every laser, tunable lasers consist of a gain medium and a resonator, most often an external cavity. This is an external cavity. They are tuned by changing the cavity's resonance condition. Our example shows the widely used Littman-Metcalf configuration. Years ago, and then I extended the laser when I came here to Princeton, where the resonator length and the diffraction angle of the grating are tuned by rotating the mirror around a pivot point such that there are no phase jumps. So this is just a subtlety that I won't really get into. The results, so there are no phase jumps in the resulting output light. A fraction of the optical power leaves the cavity through a beam splitter. Oh, in this case, they're coupling out of the beam splitter. Through a beam splitter, and is collimated, which means made into a column, into an optical fiber, which connects to the device under test, DUT. And then at the bottom here, they show scanning this laser from, let's see, that's wavelength, so this is nanometers, that's 1.5 microns, 1.515 microns to 1.535 microns going through acetylene. So it's an acetylene cell, and acetylene is a molecule that has a lot of spectral lines, and so what you're seeing there is a bunch of spectral lines. And then later on in this technical brief, they go and show this is one of those filters. So now it's scanning a filter, and the one that's not so good, so that's the blue one there is just the standard laser. And then their product, this is what they now sell, is how to get the background signal, the noise floor down, and so that they're able to get some really nice measurements on these dense wavelength division multiplexing filters. So in any case, it's just a tunable light source, and it's just like that acoustic object. It's a broadband amplifier with a tunable filter, and I'll go through in a little bit about how that tunable filter works by diffraction. Okay, so that's, and it's Keysight, so that's the Hewlett-Packard Agilent Keysight is sort of the theme. Okay, I'll get more on the light in a little bit. But by the way, as I was doing some of these demonstrations, I'm going to demonstrate some things about diffraction and light being a wave. Everything I do in the optics table, you can also do using radio. Everything. So maybe I'm going to do a couple of diffraction experiments. I'll do that in a second. So diffraction is it's due to interference of light, and then you look in the far field, you'll see the light, the radio waves coming out at different angles, and then there will be there are places where there will be maximum and minimum, right? And some of you that work with antenna systems and all may know about these facts. I don't know that much about antennas, but let me show you a couple of things here. Let's get my camera. Let's see if we can do this. Get the camera up. So now the topic for a second is diffraction, and then we'll get to Armstrong in a little bit. So I have a bright diode laser here. That crash you heard before was my slit. There's a screen in the background there. You should be okay. I want to make sure I don't get you with a laser.
No. Okay.
I have a very bright laser here. See the, let's see if I can get this. All right, now I'm going to zoom in on that streak in the background there. It's easy to see by eye. Let's see if we can see this. Yeah, there we go. So I've got you see the bright spot, and then you see all the side dots on there. And I'm going to change this. I'm just sending the laser beam through a slit. Okay, now the wavelength of light, this is a green laser, but it's about a half a micron. So the slit, the minimum slit that I can get with this device is 20 microns. So maybe it's 50 wavelengths, maybe it's 100 wavelengths. The point is that I'm taking a beam that propagates, plain wave. And then if I cut it down, if I cut it all the way down, then it acts as a point source. And then the light, this is the Huygens principle. The light propagates as if it was just a point source, so it goes in all directions. And when it's open, you have a phase relationship in the face of it, and then you can, as you come off in certain angles, you get to phase maxima and phase minimum. So you see that all those dots there?
So the slit is vertical?
The slit is vertical.
Okay.
Right. The dots are getting bigger. I'm making the slit smaller. See that? Yeah. Isn't that cool? Okay, so that's a diffraction effect, proving to us that light's a wave, right? And also, but if this was radio waves, again, I just think when I'm driving in my car and I'm sitting at a light and if you're in the wrong spot, right? How you just don't get any signal, and then you move a couple inches forward, and all of a sudden you get a strong signal. There's a lot of variation. It's the same sort of thing here. It's a single frequency that you have for your radio station, right? And then by the way, this is slit diffraction. If I had diffraction from an edge, it's knife edge diffraction, you also get a diffraction effect. In the optics field, they call it a Cornu spiral. You can figure out exactly where the maximum and minimum are. But it's just a wave phenomenon. Does this make sense? Okay, so we could just as easily do this in the radio region. I do it. And the nice thing about light is you have eyes and you can see it.
You can see it.
Right, so...
And it doesn't have to be this big.
And it doesn't have to be gigantic, right. But all of these phenomena, and by the way, there's a lot of stuff that folks know in the radio community that propagate into the optical community. So I'll tell you a little on my laser. What made it really special was that I recognized a principle that's, I think, connected to like phase radar. So if you have a bunch of sources, radio sources that are phased, you can get a beam. So you can get a directed beam. And you want to have a larger distance to get a sharper beam. And so on the laser that I developed, the principle is you want to use a diffraction grating. We'll get to what gratings are in a minute. You want to use a diffraction grating that's as big as possible. And I figured out a way to have all of the sources illuminated without having to use any extra optics. It's just geometry. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to do something else that I think is kind of cool. This is a demonstration of diffraction. So what I have here is a Brown and Sharp ruler that has a bunch of, it's got, on one side, it's every 1/8 of an inch, there's a black mark. On the other side here, every 1/16 of an inch, there's a black mark. Then over here, every 32nd of an inch, there's a bunch of lines. And then there's one here, this even goes to 64. So that means there's 64 black marks per inch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to illuminate this ruler at a glancing angle. And so where there's a black mark, it absorbs the light. So there'll be a bunch of sources. Every place where it's not black, it'll be radiating light because it's illuminated, and they're going to be fed in phase. And we're going to see that we're going to get a bunch of dots, just like the dots we have here. And this is basically a very crude diffraction grating. This is based on diffraction. So let's see if I can get this going. I had a little demo of this before. It may take me a minute to get this set up. Hold on. dots. I'm going to get the brightness down. That was really easy to set up. Like before, when I did this, it took me quite a while to get this going. See those series of dots? See what I can do here. I think if I just go a little further on the edge, I can get a little dimmer. See the dots? Mm-hmm. So those are phase light sources. Okay, the brightest one is the one that's the angle of incidence equals the angle coming off, but then the others are their phase maxima, their maximum and minimum that come. So that's a diffraction grating. And if I change the color of the light that I was doing that, the center one would stay where it is, but the others would spread out. They'd either come closer together or go further apart. So I put in white light, each one of those dots would be a spectrum, red to blue. Okay, that's a diffraction grating. Okay? So are people okay with this idea? Yes. So again, this is a way, so if you have a diffraction grating and you change the angles that you use it, you can, for example, I can have a diffraction grating at a given angle. I'll show you this in a little bit, that will retro-reflect the light at one wavelength. And then you can change an angle, and then you can use it to tune a light source. All right, maybe I'll turn this off for a minute. That's all right, so let's look at Armstrong stuff for a few minutes. Oh, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I do this lecture on the history of, I'm going to come back to this lecture that this is the lecture I give for my History of Engineering course. So I talk about Marconi, and I talk about Fessenden. And I wanted to start with this. I brought in a candle here. Okay, this is to make a point here. Okay. So you can all see the candle. So the candle flame is about 2,000 degrees Kelvin. The yellow, and the fuel is paraffin. So, and it's burning, and the people who do combustion would call this a dirty flame. Okay, why would they call it a dirty flame? Well, it's glowing. It's giving you light. So clean flames, like your gas stove, are blue. Right? They're not a dirty flame. So what's the dirt? The dirt is soot. You may have heard the phrase lamp black. Right? If I put a paper clip in the luminous part and pulled it out, it would come out all black. So what's glowing there is not the hot gases. What's glowing are little specks of carbon, soot, that are being heated up. And that kind of radiation is called black body radiation. Just think of little carbon particles being burned up. So that's what makes a candle generate light. And then up at the top there, and so the little illustration there is supposed to represent a hot object with electrons jiggling around. And we also know from electromagnetic theory, we know this from Maxwell, and Larmor, we know that if an electron is jiggling, the radiated power goes as the acceleration squared. So that's the Larmor radiation. So the more when it hits and bounces off, or if it's oscillating, that it will radiate. And the higher the frequency that it radiates, the radiated power increases with the acceleration squared. That's a Larmor relationship. And so inside those little particles of soot are all these electrons, and you see the curve at the top there are for different temperatures. So, for example, the one that's labeled 5,500 Kelvin, that's roughly the temperature of the surface of the sun. Okay, and you notice it peaks around the yellow. And that's why our eyes have, because we see in the light, that's why our eyes peak in the yellow, so we can see things more. But you also notice that that at 5,500 Kelvin, that it's generating some ultraviolet, it's generating some infrared, and it's generating some radio. So you tend not to think of the radio. The infrared, actually, you do, right? So, because if you go out during the day and you close your eyes, you can feel the sun on your face, right? That's radiant heat, right? Because the infrared has come across the vacuum of space to us, and it's warming us up, and we feel the hot sun, but basically from the infrared. But that candle there is a radio source. And for those that know about radio astronomy, you know that the sun is a source of radio waves, and it's broadband. Okay, so do that for the flame. Then I do this I lecture to liberal arts students, and then I try to explain what radio is. So on the left there, what I show there. On the right are these electrons are jiggling randomly, all different kinds of motion. And then on the left, I'm showing I have my Agilent function generator, where the tip of the function generator is going positive and negative at a given frequency, and electrons are zipping up and down the antenna. And so there, what I'm showing here on the demonstration on the left there, is an electron going up and down, and then the field lines stream out at the speed of light. And you notice that there's no wiggles up and down, so along the axis at which the electrons are moving, but you get the maximum signals propagating to the side. And the radiated pattern for an electron going in a linear motion like that it's a cosine curve. So that's just what you get from an electron jiggling. And so what I have here, let's bring up my camera. And I can get the brightness back up here. I'm going to go to autofocus on this. Let's bring up the camera. So this is my little demonstration of, whoops, didn't bring it on the screen though. I did. Oh, what's happened? Oh, Alt-Tab. Alt-Tab. That's interesting. So on one screen, on this screen it's fine. On that screen it's not. Let's see what I'm doing here. All right, let me minimize. Oh, wow. This is really interesting. I've never seen this before.
What if you get out of full screen on PowerPoint?
Which one? On PowerPoint, I'm trying to. Let's see. I see. Yeah, but I thought I am at a full screen. There it is. Okay, maybe you're right. All right, there's the, okay, let's do this. So I have my little Agilent function generator. The tip of this is going positive and negative a million times a second. So when it's positive, the electrons are zooming down. When it's negative, the electrons are going up. The electrons are moving. So it's up and down. And I also, I'm modulating it. So this is AM modulation. So I have a carrier, and I put a modulation. I have 400 hertz modulation on it. And then on the scope here, I have a little resonator. So this is just a resonator board down here. Down at the bottom here, there's an inductor and a capacitor, variable capacitor. And so I tune it. You see, I can make my resonator match that frequency. That's tuned circuit there. And if I move it closer, the signal, the detected signal gets burned myself. I move it further away, the signal gets weaker. Move it closer, it gets bigger. And then I have a little radio that I bring here, tuned to that frequency, and then I can change the change the modulation frequency I'm picking up on a radio. Okay, so this is just a little demonstrator of AM modulation and propagating radio waves through space. So let's go back. Okay, let's go back and make this full screen again. Okay. Then I talk a little bit about radio and the Titanic and whatnot. But this is the Hertz experiment. So say just a word about this. Heinrich Hertz in 1888 figured out how to transmit and receive radio waves, and he did it to measure the speed of light, the speed at which the radio waves were traveling, and he determined that radio was traveling at the speed of light. The speed of light had previously been determined. And the experiment that he had a dipole antenna, basically. So he had two plates. He put a plate at the end of the dipole, hooked up to an induction coil. And so one side would become positive, the other side would become negative, and if the difference became large enough, a spark would jump across there. And that spark would allow the negative charges to go to the positive side. And when it would do that, it would create a magnetic field, and when the magnetic field collapsed, it would then drive the particles back and forth. And so they wiggle back and forth about 5 or 6 times. So it would wind up radiating a radio wave at a frequency that's roughly determined by the length of the from one end to the other. And his experiment, I think, was 50 megahertz, something like that. And then the detector, so he has a wire as the transmitter that has a resonant frequency because it's dependent on its length. And then he had a detector that was the same length. So the ring that was the detector was the same length as the transmitter. It also had a resonant frequency, and then it had 2 little spark balls at the end that were close together, and when it sparked here, you'd get a spark there. And then he moved it around to make measurements. So his detector was a spark and a wire. Really simple. So that's both a source and a detector. I really love these early experiments. No electronics in this. These ignition coils. And then here's just a little, and by the way, I reproduced these experiments in our lab, and we have modern tools. They didn't have it in Hertz's time. So when I told you that you got about roughly 5 oscillations after each spark, we made a device that was to scale of what Hertz did. We saw it on an oscilloscope, and we saw that you got about 5 or 6 oscillations. It depends on how close the balls are together, because the spark ionizes the air, which is like a pathway for the signal to go across. If the gap is larger, the resistance is larger, you get fewer oscillations. If it's closer, you get more oscillation. Okay, so that was the Hertz experiment. And then here's a panpipe again. I was just trying to explain this idea of the relationship between wave speed, frequency, and wavelength. I don't need to go into that now. So let's now look at Armstrong's stuff. Let's get rid of the camera. The camera for now. Okay, so Armstrong. So I looked in the Wikipedia page for regeneration. So this is regenerative circuit. This is the Armstrong circuit. Now, I have a radio that uses the Armstrong. Let me make that a little bigger. So we have a vacuum triode. The key thing in the Armstrong circuit is that, so I learned this, that what we call the plate circuit, Armstrong called the wing circuit. That was what they called it in that day. We'll pull up his paper in a little bit.
Yeah, that was the forest terminology.
Yeah, and they also had something called an ultra audio. You may know
Well, that's a
about
little later on. But
okay, but so normally what happens is you have a hot filament, it boils off electrons, and the electrons in the plate is positive with respect to the filaments. The electrons go across to the plate. So they'll go from, the electrons will travel from the filament to the plate, but if you try to run current in the other direction, it doesn't because the plate is cold. So these electrons are boiling off the filament, literally. So it's a hot, there's what's known as a work function, which is the amount of energy it takes to pull an electron out of a material. And when there's hot, it's easier for the electrons to escape. So that's thermionic emission. And then if you put a gate, put a grid in front of there, what happens, and I'll show you Armstrong's paper. It's just beautiful, his discussion about the audion. He compares a tube without a grid versus with a grid. And he finds that what happens is the grid collects charge, becomes negative, and it chokes off the flow. And then what you normally do is you put an electrical signal in on the grid, you change the potential of the grid, and that will allow you to modulate the current going through the triode. And then the regenerative idea is, this is Armstrong's brilliant concept. This is it's just like the feedback before. You take you couple some of the signal that's in the wing circuit to the grid circuit, just with a tuner, and if the coupling is strong enough, it self-oscillates. So just the way this acoustic thing self-oscillates. You have a broadband amplifier, you have a narrowband filter, and a method for feedback. So and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Al, this is just a regenerative oscillator.
that's pretty much it.
Just a regenerative oscillator. It's just like the audio system. It's just like the laser. Now I brought up so it's easy to find these things. That's Armstrong's later paper. Let me get the earlier paper. That's the dye laser. Thought I had it here. Maybe it's here. So, wow, I thought I had it here. This is the one at the end here. All right, let me just bring this up. Armstrong, is it this one? So operating features of the audion. Oh, this is the one. Okay, so this is an electrical world, December 1914. I thought at first that this was an article that described the regenerative, but it really just describes the audion. This is a beautiful little paper of his. So first off, he has, he figures out how potential on the grid affects the current that's flowing in the audion. By the way, DeForest, we'll see in a minute, he doesn't believe this. DeForest could not make a good vacuum tube. His tubes were gassy and they were quite variable. So this was a general principle, and basically he found that as you change the potential on the grid, you can have a large amount of current and it saturates, or if you make it negative, it chokes off the flow. So that's sort of a characteristic of the tube. And he does this beautiful experiment. So I never knew about this. So here's his experiment where he has a hot filament, and he calls this the wing circuit. He has one wing, so it's all in one glass envelope. One wing is the hot filament to the one wing, and the other one's the hot filament with a grid in between to the other wing. And then he compares the current, and he finds that, that the current is greater going to the left wing than to the right wing. And so from that he concludes that the grid is interfering and charging up. And he measures the potential on it. So in this paper he goes and then describes the operation, and then he does some experiments at low frequency. This is at about 50 hertz to prove some of the ideas of the Audion. So this is a very nice paper worth finding out about.
Yeah, that was really interesting because there was no such thing as a cathode ray oscilloscope. So he does it way at low frequencies so they can do it with a mechanical oscillograph.
Oscillograph, right. It was 50 hertz. By the way, I love his, this is his test circuit. So what he's got here is he's got a battery, he's got a capacitor and an inductor, and a single pole double throw switch. So when the switch is to the left, he charges up the capacitor. And then he flips the switch to this side, and then the capacitor discharges through it's an LC, and it just rings down. So that hit it, and then he couples that inductively to the grid. And so that's what he's using to test out his circuits. Really, very elegant, very nice stuff. And he also talks about modulation. They've already figured out how to use this to detect radio waves. Then his other paper, this is the Proceedings of the IEEE. This is the paper that comes out a couple of months later. This is in the Proceedings of the IEEE. This is a fascinating paper. This one, he describes his regenerative oscillator. And he takes some of those same illustrations from electrical world, and they're the first illustrations in this paper. Very nicely written, very clear. So these are some of those same illustrations. Now that the electrical world one did not talk about regeneration. But on this one, he then gets, it's a much longer paper. He starts then talking about coupling, so here he's coupling some of the wing circuit back into the grid side. And he has a number of variations of how to do that. Fascinating paper. I won't go into the details on it, but what's at the end, which is page 25 here. Let's get to the end. This is where that idiot, Lee DeForest, starts chiming in. There's a discussion at the end.
Oh, this is the paper with the discussion.
Oh, it's hilarious. And the editor cuts it off at the end. This is really hilarious. You can see just how it's a discussion. Lee DeForest. This is wild. By letter, absence from New York, and stress of business prevents my giving Mr. Armstrong's paper the thorough discussion it merits from me. Briefly, I must state that my investigation of the simple Audion detector, the Audion amplifier, and the ultra Audion, I'm not sure what that is, for undamped waves, do not bear out completely with the results and conclusions announced by that writer, namely Armstrong. In the first place, anyone who has considerable experience with Audions must admit that the behavior of different bulbs varies in many particulars and to an astonishing degree. The wing potential current curves for different bulbs, or even the same bulb at different times under different conditions, vary wildly. And he goes on like this.
But if you want to know, by the way, the ultra Audion
yes.
was DeForest's oscillating circuit.
Yep.
Once it became clear that Armstrong could make the tube oscillate, Lee went back to the lab and futzed around until he found a non-Armstrong circuit that would oscillate. It's really more of a Colpitts oscillator. But
I see. So, in any case, this discussion is really nasty.
Yeah.
Armstrong is not nasty in return, but he basically says that he doesn't know what he's talking about. He explains that if you get the gas out of the vacuum tube, you don't have this problem with each one being variable. They all behave the same. It's just I learned a lot from reading this about other people have told me. So here's Armstrong responding.
Yeah, if you want to understand something, have Armstrong explain it to you.
Armstrong, very clear. He's clearly
And
knows
I
what he's
think,
talking
I think
about.
part of that was that he was hanging around with Michael Pupin and
At
academic
Columbia.
people
And also
like
there's
that, yes.
Moorcraft, I think he also.
Yeah, Moorcraft,
Yeah.
and
So then, now this is the patent, his regenerative patent. And so I've done some work as a patent expert, so I actually know how to read patents. I didn't prior to my being involved in about a dozen cases. And I understand from, this is Armstrong's regenerative patent from 1914, understand why it got challenged. And it eventually, DeForest won, right? This was sort of one of the great injustices in the patent world is, I think Cordova was the Supreme Court, it went to the Supreme Court, they ruled in favor of DeForest. And then Pupin came out in the New York Times the next day to say the Supreme Court doesn't know what they're talking about. But here's this was the dominant claim. It says an audio and wireless receiving system having a resonant wing circuit, that's on the plate, interlinked with the resonant grid circuit upon which the received oscillations are impressed. The resonant grid circuit having a capacity so related to the grid as to receive and retain the charge which accumulates thereon. It's a very broad statement. It's easily challenged. There's a test in patent law. It's called the function way result test. And that's a test that's frequently used. This would not stand up to the function way result. So you could have a lot of different configurations that would meet this claim and that it would be easy to challenge. And I suspect that that probably would happen. I haven't looked into the literature on this, but it's I can see some problems in the patent as to why it got challenged. But it was very clear from the discussion that that Armstrong knew what he was talking about and DeForest didn't. Okay, I'm almost done. Let's see, how are we doing on time? I wrote one other thing. I wrote an article about. Yeah, let me go through this for a couple of minutes. This is an article I wrote about lasers. Oh, and I also want to show you this. I have a spectral lamp. Oh, I have some neon lasers. I have a couple more things to do. How are we doing on time? What time did we start? It's 9:13. Good. We're okay? Yeah, we're good. We're okay. Maybe another 20 minutes or so? Sure. You guys up for that?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay. All right, so I wrote an article about, this is an article, this full screen. This is an article, it was in a book about lasers. It's about pulsed lasers. So this, the very first laser was a ruby laser. So it was a ruby crystal. It was Ted Naiman.
What year would that be?
1960.
Yeah.
So he invented the first laser. There's Townsend Shallow. So the laser grows out of the maser. So the maser is worked with Charlie Towns and Art Shallow. Towns was a physicist, engineer at Columbia, and Towns was his postdoc, and then eventually went to Bell Labs. And actually, Bob Gordon was involved in the maser as well. So the maser is the original one was based on ammonia, and it was, the gain medium was ammonia vapor that was excited, and it's a narrow band amplifier. So as opposed to my hi-fi system there, or the vacuum tube, which are broadband amplifiers, this is a narrow band amplifier. You put in radiation at just the right frequency, you get amplification. All others you don't. And then the maser, it's microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. The size of the maser was about the size of a wavelength. So microwaves, it's going to be centimeters or larger. So it was a centimeter-sized cavity. And the problem with lasers is as the wavelength got smaller, they try to make the cavities smaller, but you had less medium and less gain, and it wasn't enough to be self-sustaining. And then the brilliant idea was, well, it doesn't have to be the size of a wavelength. It can be 1,000 times or 1,000,000 times the size of a wavelength. still, so you have more medium. So that was what led to the laser. And the first laser was taking a rod of ruby. So ruby is, I think, chromium is the chromium ions is what gives it the red color, and surrounding it with a flash lamp and putting mirrors on the end of it. And then you hit the flash lamp, and then you get a red beam coming out of it. So that was 1960. And then what's below here is this is what was happening. The flash lamp provided, so it pumped energy into a high state that couples, and then in order for lasing action to happen, you have to have more population in the upper state than the lower state. And that generally is a hard condition to achieve because the ground state, the bottom state, is usually has the lowest state. It's just think of a room filled with shelves, and you have marbles in it, and you shake up the room. All the marbles come to the ground, right? So they're going to stay down there. So what you can in a laser, if you have some marbles up at a high shelf, they're not you'll have fewer at the high than at the bottom, but you'll have maybe more at the top than, say, a lower shelf that's unoccupied. And if you can get that condition, you can put in light at the frequency that corresponds to the two shelf distances, and then you put light in, you get more light out because you've taken some of the stored energy, you lower its energy by lowering it to a shelf, and then you get the energy goes into the light. So that's how you get amplification. So that's what happens in a ruby laser. So that was the first laser. Then the second laser, I don't know if I have it here. These are other types of lasers. Peter Sorokin, who was at IBM, invented the second laser, which was a dye laser. And what he realized is instead of using chromium in a crystal, he realized that a fluorescent dye, we all know about fluorescent dyes, right? Because they're like, if you have a white shirt, you've seen a white shirt in black light, it glows, right? So what's glowing is the still beam dye that's in the shirt. And you put ultraviolet light in, and then all of a sudden the ultraviolet gets converted into visible light, and it looks bright. But to us, it looks like it's glowing. And I have, let's see, I have a black light here. I think you can probably see this. See the colored dyes here?
Yes.
So this is a black light, it's UV light. This red one here is rhodamine 6G.
Stand on the other side.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Perfect.
Does that look okay?
Yeah.
So there's rhodamines, there's coumarins, there's Nile blue here, which is a red dye, nice red dye. Here's a, so these are fluorescent dyes. Fluorescent dyes will convert ultraviolet light to a lower frequency, and they will exhibit gain. So they're unlike atoms or ions, which have this this level structure. There's level structures in liquids, but the molecules, instead of being a single atom or a single ion, have molecular weights of about 500. So they have a zillion lines because they have lots of modes of operation. And then that reduction from ultraviolet to the visible is due to a particular bond. It's a carbon-carbon double bond in the molecule, which is at 2400 wave numbers. So there's this shift. And then if you put light into that, anywhere in a range of wavelengths, you put in light at one frequency, it will amplify it. So that becomes a broadband amplifier as opposed to a ruby crystal, which is a narrowband amplifier. And so if you have one of those dye lasers, what you could do is build a cavity around it with a filter, and then you make it tunable. Okay, so Peter Sorokin invented it, and his original tunable laser, he said, well, I'll use different colored dyes. So he had a blue laser, he had a green laser, he had an orange laser, and so on. So that was the origin of the tunable laser with Peter. I spent a summer working with Peter, great guy, but he was jealous of Maiman because Peter said he invented the second and the third laser. Nobody knew about Peter, but everybody knew about Maiman. So here's, this was the concept of the type of laser when I was in grad school that everybody was using. So here you have a nitrogen laser, which is ultraviolet light, goes into a dye cell. So I'd have one of these fluorescent dyes. And then you surround it, if you put two mirrors around it, it would blaze. And then in this case, they used a grating, and the grating was used in retroreflection. So you'd come in with light, so light would diffract back. And the angle of that grating relative to the axis would affect the color. So this was, and the lens that was here, this is where I think everybody in this room would understand. Remember we talked about phased radar? You want to have a large physical space. You don't want to have a narrow beam because you only illuminate just the small part. You want to illuminate the whole grating. And so in those days, people were using a lens. And lenses are not very good because they're refractive materials and the surface quality is not great. And that's the laser that I developed and improved upon that. We'll get to that in a second. So actually, let's just get to it. Let me just show you the way this works. And I brought a couple of these lasers in. So this is the basic laser. You have a dye cell, a mirror that's 100% reflecting, one that's partially reflecting. Light bounces back and forth and you get a beam out. And this is a broadband amplifier. And then you can make it better by using a grating. Yeah, on the left over there. So you replace that mirror there with a grating, which then will reflect light of only one wavelength back, and then you get a beam you can change the color. But it's not very narrow. And then this one on the right, this is what we did, is you use the grating at a glancing angle, so it illuminates the whole surface of it. And then you complete the cavity with a mirror, so there's a beam that goes this way, and then there's a beam that bounces off there, and you change the angle there, and you change the color, and you can use the whole surface of the grating, and that gives you a laser that's very narrow in wavelength. And then this is the final version of that laser that I published in 1984, I think it was. Let me bring up the camera. And I'll show you what that laser looks like. The camera up here. Here's the camera. I brought that. This is the laser that. This was my prototype. Actually, you can even see the colors on the diffraction grating. Maybe. So where that arrow is, that's the diffraction grating. And then this is the mirror. That's a mirror. That's the tuning mirror. And then there's the other mirror is right behind it. And so this was the laser that I published in 1984 that really caught the attention of a number of manufacturers. By the way, this laser design is being used by probably 50 companies. I've never patented it, with no regrets, by the way. Here, I'll hold this up. Punch in Littman laser. So, like, this is a company that they grab my name, but they don't send me any money. So they have a whole line based on that design. Keysight does it. Thor Labs, which is a local New Jersey company, they have they make it. New Focus makes it, and so on. The good news for me was that I published. There was a fellow in Israel that developed the same laser before I did, and he didn't publish, and I didn't know about him, so I published first. So I got the recognition for it, and he got the Israeli patent. They never patented it in the U.S., so it was an issue. So let me finish up with my demonstration of gas lasers. So I have a neon lamp here that I brought in. This will be the last part. So this is a helium neon laser. Let's see, I guess I can unplug. Hold on, unplugging. Hold on, I'm going to unplug this. Did that light up? It's up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get the camera up. So this is a tube filled with neon gas. Whoops. It's a tube filled with neon gas. I did this before. And I have a diffraction grating. Make sure I get it in the right orientation. So this is a piece of plastic with a lot of scratches in it. Just think of that ruler with all the notches. It's the same thing, but this is a transmission grating. The ruler was a reflection grating. So if I put this in front of the camera, it will allow me to break up light into its colors. And so I'm going to do that here. Let's see, I will put this here. You see the lines on the colors on the left there?
Yeah.
See all those? So neon has red lines, it's got a couple of green lines, it's got blue lines. See all the different lines there?
Yes.
A whole series of lines. And by the way, there's just another set on the other side. That's a property of the diffraction grating. Those are called orders. And if there's another order further out, yeah, you see the second order further out? See it's spread out even more? So the higher you go to an angle, the greater the dispersion. It's called d lambda d theta. So the reason I'm showing you this is neon gas as opposed to the liquid, which the lines are broad. So they're broad enough that they continuously give you a broadband amplifier. Here, you get gain at each one of those wavelengths, but not in between. And what I have back here is I have a helium neon laser, the red laser. That was one of those lines. This is the famous helium neon 6328 nanometers. So that's the red laser that everybody thinks of as helium neon. I'm going to turn on this other one. It takes a minute for it to warm up. So on this one, it's just two mirrors with a tube filled with neon gas and some helium. The helium transfers some of the excitation to the neon, and then that creates a population inversion, and then you get gain. And then this is also helium neon laser, but you notice it's a different color. See that? Yeah. So what's inside these tubes is the same gas, and the only difference is the one on the right here is using an aluminum mirror which reflects all wavelengths, and then it wants to go at the wavelength of its greatest gain. And the orange one here, they put a mirror that has a lot of reflectivity at orange, but not any at the red. So it's going at orange instead. And you can get helium neon lasers at any of the lines, any of the colored lines that were in this little demonstration here. Right, any of those colors. So you can get a green one, you can get a blue one, and so on. But you have to choose different optics. It's basically going back to my panpipe thing. You just put a filter in there, and there's gain at those wavelengths, and you can get the laser to run at different wavelengths. Let me just see. I think I might have exhausted you and exhausted everything that I wanted to say. Let me just take a quick look. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so that's it. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much.
I can take a couple of questions if there are.
Yeah, if there are any questions, please.
Yes.
How does a laser pointer work? What's the mechanics on that?
So okay, so it uses a laser diode, and I'll tell you, I'm an atomic physicist. I can tell you a lot about atoms. Can't tell you a lot about solid state materials. So the solid state physics in a laser diode, I know a little bit about it. Let's see. So I think I know a little bit about the diode effect, right? So diode effect, you have N-type materials and P-type materials. So materials in which electrons are free to move, and P-type materials you have the absence of electrons, holes move. And then there's a junction. And then there's a band gap, there's a separation, there's an energy gap. So you have valence electrons and conduction electrons, and you can't, there's a gap. It's sort of like the quantum levels. And in a diode, so optoelectronic devices, you can shine light in. These are diodes that are optically active. You can shine light in at a large enough energy. You can drive an electron from the valence band to the conduction band, as long as you go larger than a gap. And then you can do that process in reverse. And in physics, almost everything goes in reverse. So if you have more in the upper state than in the lower state, it decays and it gives off light. So, but the detailed physics of what's going on in the laser diode, I don't know. But I do know that they can fabricate these devices in such a way where you can run current in them. It's like the light emitting diode. You run current in them, and then they will generate light. And then because as you have this inversion for a particular type, they're called, let's see, they're intrinsic semiconductors. There are two types of semiconductors. The silicon type devices, you generally don't generate light, but in the like gallium arsenide, these are the 3-5 devices. On those they don't have loss in the material, and you do generate light. So those are the things that I think are used in these laser diodes. And then they have gain just the way the medium has gain. If you have more in the upper state than the lower state, you put it between mirrors between it, and then you can get the light coming out in a beam. Okay, so that's the laser diodes. Now the laser diodes also are in the same. This much I do know. The liquid diode, the liquid lasers, because liquids are very dense, all of the spectral lines get broadened so that you get a whole band. And solids are even denser than liquids. And so the same thing happens in a solid, so in these laser diodes. So the laser diodes, they look like they're at one wavelength, but they're not. They're over a range of wavelengths. So the reason that my laser got picked up by the diode laser people is that you could tune them, but you can't tune it as far, over such a large range. I mean, literally that orange dye that I showed you there, it literally will go from green to red. I mean, you turn this angle, it's just beautiful. It's like you're dialing in a rainbow. Okay, whereas the infrared ones, these ones that are used with the laser diodes, it's a narrower range, but they can still be tuned. So my little laser pointer there, it's like the feedback amplifier without any filter on it, right? So it's squealing at its most, at the frequency that has the highest gain. Whereas if you put a filter on it, this external cavity, then you can actually tune it.
Great.
Yes.
You also said the candle that emits RF radiation?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what frequency would that be, and how would you?
It's broadband. So in other words, it's totally broadband. It's over the entire spectrum.
So if you put a radio next to it, you might hear something.
You'd have to be really sensitive radio. So, if you know about radios, you know that there's, I think it's with the Johnson noise, that's the thermal noise. So if you just took a resistor, this was a question on my PhD exam at MIT, which I got wrong. I was asked the question, about the noise coming from a resistor. So I said, I have no idea what the noise would be coming from a resistor. And so it was pointed out to me that the resistor has electrons, free electrons. And you heat it up, the electrons are moving, right? So electrons moving, well, the charge moving is dq dt, the change of charge per unit time. That's a current. Ohm's law says that the voltage is the current times the resistance. So the voltage that you get, the voltage variation that you get on a hot resistor is because of the random electrons moving, and it scales with the resistance. The larger the resistance is for a given temperature, the higher the noise. That's the thermal noise. I think that's Johnson noise, if I'm not mistaken.
And that's heat then, right?
That's heat causes the electrons to move, and then Ohm's law, it gives you a random current. That random current gets by Ohm's law gets converted to a random voltage. And so for that reason, you like to have the impedance of your instruments be low because the thermal noise is lower. So 50 ohms is the standard, for transmission lines, right? Well, you want to keep that resistance low. That's at all frequencies. You want to keep it low, and the main reason for that is you don't want this random noise due to the heat to interfere with it. And it's also the case that you want to cool your instruments. So if you cool it down, you reduce the thermal noise. So that's, these are all, these are things that all make a lot of sense, but you got to learn to think about them in sort of the right way. I hope that answers your question there.
Is the paper that you showed that you use in your class, the one you first showed, about the radio and that and telegraphy, is that available somewhere?
Let's see, which paper was that? That's it.
It was the one where you showed that it's about Edison and this and the Westinghouse and all that.
Oh yeah, that's a lecture that I give. That's not published. You have to pay $60,000 to Princeton, enroll as a student, and then you can take my course. And by the way, I don't see any of that money.
Edit your class.
By the way, actually, auditors are allowed to, I have community auditors that come and take that class. So if you're in the area, you're welcome to audit it. Any other questions?
If you walked into Thor Labs, would they know you? Like, oh my God,
they don't know me, but they know my work.
Yeah.
The people at New Focus, that used to be Newport, know me because the owner, Milton Chang, invited me to help with some of their products. And I've worked with a number of laser companies. But I've been out of the optics field. So I was very active in the 80s, and by the 1990s, I was out of making the optics business. And then in sort of 2005, thereabouts, I started working on space telescopes. So it's still optics, but not laser optics. So this is all, all this stuff was sitting in the back corner of my office, having collected dust for 25 years. And I was actually glad for the opportunity to pull it out. All the stuff still works. So that's,
well, we're
yes.
certainly glad that you did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mike, if I understand you correctly, then you could heat up a resistor, and with a sensitive voltmeter, you would detect.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I have to try it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it's going to be like microvolts.
Okay.
Okay. It's, and so these electrometers, you can get way down. You can actually the electrometers you can get down to like 10 electrons per second in terms of their current. Now, and they're really very, very sensitive. But yeah, it's not a big effect. But if you did it with a large value resistor, do it with a 100 megohm resistor, and heat it up, you'll get a good signal out of it. And it's just
Does
random.
it have to be a carbon resistor?
No, so it could be a wire, but wires are going to have low resistance unless it's a very skinny wire. Any resistor, high resistance. So these very high voltage, high value resistors, they're usually they're on glass. It's very thin. Usually it's thin metal that's spiraled around. You get one of those and heat it up. You'll be able to see a very large signal. Okay, I guess that's worn everybody out.
No, overwhelming. All right, I want to thank you again for pulling up there. Mind you, never fail to enthuse us. Believe me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to join the auction, it is outside, so please come out and make your bids.
That's the end of the meeting.